Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Keeping Pace with Tomorrow's IT Future, Adopting a Low-Code Digital Automation Platform, brought to you by NewGen. Thank you for joining us. My name is Stacy and I'll be your moderator today. Before we begin, I'd just like to go through a few housekeeping items. So this webinar is recorded and you're currently in listen-only mode. You can submit any questions you have throughout the time of this webinar via the Q&A function on your screen, and we'll address the questions at the end of today's discussion. Once the webinar is over, you'll receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording. So joining us today, we have the Vice President, Principal Analyst of Forrester, Rob Koplowitz, Associate Vice President of NewGen, Anurag Shah, Global SME Low-Code Platform of NewGen, Varun Gai. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'll hand over to you now, Rob, to kick us off the discussion.
Thank you, Stacy, and thanks everyone for joining today. We have a lot to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump right in. We're here to talk about process automation and the role of process automation in driving digital transformation, and this has certainly been a very, very hot topic within my research. Every 2 years, we do a pretty large survey on the topic of process automation, and this survey was brought in right in January, so it's pretty recent, but it is before COVID and it's before the current economic situation, and so we're going to dive into that, what that's driving as well. But let's just take a look at what's going on in the current landscape. You know, right now we have organizations that are driving towards digital transformation. They're trying to drive towards end-to-end automation. There's still a few things going on out there that are problematic. If I look at the chart on the left, we see that there's still 76% of organizations that have at least a few dependencies on paper moving around, and some of them have quite a bit more. Some have many. Up 24% have many things that are running on paper. And then the other thing that's going on around manual processes is a lot of things that are running in what we call electronic manual routing, which we describe as Excel, email, these types of things that people use to kind of push forward processes when they don't have a better option. And you can see that folks have many of their processes running in this manner, 40%. And if we look at that against the overall objectives, we have two patterns that we're following. So the first pattern is folks who are trying to transform end-to-end processes as part of a digital transformation project. There's 27% in that category. And then there's another group that are trying to just automate large numbers of current manual processes for driving efficiency and effectiveness. We add it up, we get to 54% that are in the process of trying to drive end-to-end automation. And in January, that looked awfully good. We really thought we were in pretty good shape, but then COVID hits, and we find ourselves in a very, very different situation. In March 2020, we described this as the new normal beginning. We have employees working from home. We have employees that are separated from their paper files. They're disrupted in their person-to-person processes, things like direct sales happening very, very ineffectively, and we have a whole set of new automation priorities, and we have new loads that are happening on the back office. Revenue is not being recognized. Customers are not being onboarded. We have just a host of horror stories that are coming into us from our client base. And what really happened here? Well, a bunch of things happened. Number one, everybody got sent home. We now have this concept of remote workers, which disrupted face-to-face decision-making time. Paper-based processes started failing entirely. Even if there was just a couple of them somewhere embedded in one of your longer-running processes, if you had to pass a piece of paper, if you had to monitor the mailroom, it stopped happening. And we had those partially automated processes that suddenly had very long wait states or weren't working at all. The staffs that were separated from these files simply couldn't function. So all of a sudden we had this massive new urgency around automation. And we saw a huge leveraging of things like digital process automation platforms that enabled low-code automation that could be done rapidly, could be done effectively, and probably most importantly, really close to the business people that really understood how to get these processes back online as quickly as possible. Now, the needs are urgent, the goals are strategic, But there's a piece that I really want to bring forward as we look at the survey data. If we look at the breadth of the data, we'll find a whole bunch of goals that people are looking at. And these are things like digital transformation, better customer experience, and we see that there's a dramatic drop in cost reduction as a primary driver of process automation. But what's really important to note is there's still organizations that are out there, almost all of them, that are measuring that cost takeout. If we ask how important is cost reduction to your process automation, it's not the primary driver, but if we ask how many folks are measuring it, 72% say it's important now, and 22% say it's important in the future. What this means and why this is so significant is for a couple of reasons. The first of which is, even though we're driving towards strategic goals, those strategic goals are continuing to drive efficiency, effectiveness, and they're taking out cost. Cost reduction is still going on. It's still important, and it is still a very, very natural result of the work that we're doing here around process automation. So let's dive a little bit more into what's going on out there, because if you sort of look at that first slide and say, well, what's going on out there in terms of paper processes, what's going out there in terms of Excel processes, all of a sudden you end up with a very big number. There is a very, very large number of processes that we're driving towards automation. Folks are taking a very, very measured approach to doing this. They're taking an approach which actually routinizes this and allows it to be driven at very, very high scale. We used to look into our processes, the discovery process, specifically to drive efficiency and to say, how can we drive efficiency, particularly in manufacturing, for a long time. One of the things that we get as a byproduct of this is, to the extent that we automate, to the extent that we drive more and more routinized functions through automation, we get conformance. Not only do we get conformance, but we can track that conformance. We can look and see if things are actually conforming from the actual process that we're doing, the as-is process, to what is actually documented as to what should be the process. Excuse me. If we move forward, we end up in this new world where increasingly what we're trying to do is enhance processes. We're trying to have processes that are aligning with our corporate goals. So if we have things like customer onboarding, I want 80% of my customer onboarding to be done in a straight-through fashion, that can be complex in a largely manual organization. And if we start to look at that and say that there's thousands of manual steps that are taking place, or hundreds, we will require guidance. So we're starting to see an increased focus just on process optimization, almost back to the days of business process reengineering, and aligning that with automation goals and aligning that with bringing these things closer and closer to the business. How are we doing that? We're actually taking much more planful approaches to discovery. If we look at the top of this, we see an explosion in process mining. That's a way for folks to understand what's going on in the organization and how their processes are running. If we look below that, we can take process mining and also apply it to analysis. So not only have we discovered those processes, created a baseline for those processes, but we now have the ability to analyze those processes and start to look for hotspots. And a lot of times those hotspots are mapping to things that are being done inefficiently today, or perhaps are candidates for automation. These could be exception handling loops. These could be things that we've done manually for a long time. This could be integration points between departments, different parts of the organization that traditionally haven't worked together. As we move forward, we see this new energized information around reengineering, the documentation of what's going on, the alignment and collaboration with the business, the process experts, as well as the automation efforts. And we don't always want to jump to automation. There is a role in process improvement without necessarily driving towards automation. But the dirty little secret is we're almost always driving towards automation. If we look at why folks are doing this, if we look at the goals of why folks are doing digital transformation and process automation, it's in order to deal with a potentially disruptive situation. And that disruptive situation can be anything from some digital predator entering your business. What if the boogeyman comes in and does this so much cheaper and more effectively that they drive me out of the market? Or the business event could be something like COVID-19 that requires you to be able to be extremely agile and be able to reconfigure and automate processes almost at a moment's notice. If we think about the technology landscape and all the things that are going on, there are a whole bunch of different technologies out there that are available to us, and we should be very careful about how we think about implementing these things. So we have, in any given process, we could have new interaction models. We can have people leveraging new technology like voice or chat to give us new ways to interact with your company, your customer, government service, a healthcare scenario. We have low-code tools. If you look at the tools that are available, we can build really quickly what used to require, really long cycles to build, and probably more importantly, really strong skills to maintain. We now have tools that allow us to build very quickly in the rules area, in the low-code area. We have the onboarding of things like rules and decisioning. We have complex capabilities that we can now bring to bear that can allow us to do conditional logic right in the midst of a process. There's a lot of energy around RPA. RPA is able to do amazing things. If you integrate RPA indirectly into the process, what you have are things that were formerly manual wait states, where we might not have had an API or there were human tasks taking place. We can actually automate them, do them much more quickly, do them with lower error rates, and more importantly, we can keep them online and we can monitor them within the orchestration environment. And AI being leveraged across all of these different functions. But tying all these things together, we have the concept of digital process automation, workflow management. We have the ability to orchestrate and monitor all of these technologies as well as human technologies right within this environment. And if we look at this environment, what we'll find is there is a real interesting set of complementary technologies. And I'm afraid we're in a little bit of a state now where folks are jumping to technology answers. If we just throw enough RPA bots at something, we'll be automated. If we just throw enough AI at it, we'll be automated. These things aren't true. These are technologies that are incredibly powerful when used in connection with other technologies. If we take these things and say, what if we were to apply it to something that I think is near and dear to all of us, something like a customer onboarding process? We look at a process modeling environment from a modeling and documentation output here, not necessarily tied to technology, but managing a real, albeit simplified, but a real customer onboarding process here. And you see multiple steps that are being taken through digital process automation. Then you see an assignment of a customer service rep. We're going to use rules to do that because that could be based upon expertise. It could be based upon availability. It could be based upon region. It could be based upon language spoken. This can become a very, very complex set of conditional logic that allows us to assign the right customer service rep. In this case, we're onboarding somebody, and we need to know that they're not potentially fraud. Representing fraud, we can do AI to do threshold analysis for fraud detection, multiple steps happening through RPA. But the piece to keep in mind in all of this is that this is being orchestrated, this is being managed within a single environment. And the single environment has all of these technologies within it. And if I sort of jump out here and say, what are these different technologies that we have, and just look at a high level at some of them that are involved in this, we realize we need a governance model to keep these things in their place. But at the top, we have these two categories, DPA wide and DPA deep. This is an area that we call digital process automation. This is the area that NewGen falls into, DPA, digital process automation. These are technologies that are able to manage, often have embedded all of the technologies that we're talking about here, but most importantly, they have that modeling, that orchestration, and that monitoring engine and the ability to reconfigure these processes without recoding the application. So what lives beneath that? Beneath that, we have dynamic case management. things happening in a more ad hoc, often content-centric manner. These are things that need to be managed to completion as well, even though they're not following a structured process. We can embed RPA bots in there. We'll often describe bots as being able to handle things we simply weren't able to handle before. There was no API, so we can do a client-side access to that information, use it as an integration workaround. They're task-oriented. We can actually apply logic to those as well. We mentioned rules and decisioning, and then a host of things that are happening within artificial intelligence, whether it's computer vision or fraud detection or initial credit assessment or any one of a number of things, natural language processing being used for identification and classification of unstructured data. All of these things can happen within the umbrella of digital process automation and drive that complex end-to-end process for you. I want to just bring up one more pattern here that we're seeing. I think it's a particular interesting pattern that we've been observing here over the course of the last few years. And this actually starts to speak to this concept of the core system. And then what does the core system look like? The core system being your line of business applications. Now, increasingly, especially with COVID happening, we're finding out that a lot of these line of business systems are not very flexible, right? So we've got everything from COBOL systems that are breaking down because of the load that's being placed on them. Currently, we're seeing multiple instances of that, all the way out to folks who say, I don't want to do customization of SAP or Oracle or Salesforce. I want to do my customizations outside of that environment. Or even now, increasingly, the old build versus buy conversation. We've really been, the pendulum's really swung towards buy an application where you can, and we're still going to buy a lot of core applications. We're not going to build a financial system. We're probably not going to build a CRM system. But increasingly what we're finding is an appetite for building certain modules of things that could be actually added on, things like distribution, things like doctor-patient journeys that are increasingly being automated. We've seen a huge interest, a spike in interest around building custom supply chain applications with what's going on in the world today. So the core systems exist. They're going to continue to exist, but digital process automation playing this really interesting and emerging role in terms of building those customizations outside of the core system so that the core system stays pure and we can make it far more agile. The second pattern being that we can actually have processes that run across multiple line of business systems. Your processes do not respect your line of business systems. They don't respect your legacy technology. They don't respect your organizational boundaries. When you're onboarding a customer, if it touches 5 different departments, it has to look seamless to the customer. And so these systems allow us to build across these multiple silos. And then lastly, the pattern that I just referred to a moment ago, which is that pattern of saying, I'm increasingly willing to build it if it's going to differentiate my company and differentiate my brand in the marketplace. So with that, what I'd like to do is thank you for spending about 20 minutes with me here today. I'm going to stick around and wait for questions. Here's my contact information. That's my Twitter handle. You can hit me on LinkedIn. Happy to interact with any of you folks. At the end here, we'll have a Q&A. But at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Varun and let him take it from here.
Thanks, Rob. And good morning, everyone. So, as Rob explained, that the digital and the process transformation could be scaled into multiple areas across industries and processes. I thought maybe give you a walkthrough how an organization can use a low-code digital transformation platform into their organization and scale into various processes within the company. Now, the examples could be many. We have public institutions using our platform, automating various processes, especially like the citizen-centric processes where citizens, say, applying for a product or a service with the government agency. Now, how that process end-to-end from a digital to a back-office process could be automated over here. Similarly, in insurance, somebody applying for a claim or a new policy, and likewise in a bank, if somebody wants to open an account with a bank and onboard as part of the journey, now how that process could be automated. Now, for simplicity, I took a bank's customer onboarding journey because I'm sure everyone can correlate to that today, and all of us would have opened an account one day. So I took an example for one of the smart bank who wants to go into this digital transformation journey on a low-code automation platform. And Smart Bank wants to automate their customer onboarding process over Newgen's low-code automation. And very important, they want to follow an agile implementation model. So Smart Bank assembles the team which would be working on this particular project, which encompass various people from the project manager to the business stakeholders here, Richard and Sarah, and the IT team would be working along with the compliance team. So once the team is set up, Sandra, who is the project manager, she charts out the entire agile project plan, on which the whole team would be working upon and going through this automation journey. She invites all the stakeholders for a kickoff meeting where they discuss all objectives and the goals of this particular project and assign various roles and activities to each and every stakeholder. So where Richard is responsible for all the business requirements and the customer journey, Sarah has to make sure the processes at the back office side, how they are going to run, how she will ensure that the process runs as per the turnaround time and the SLAs business wants to work upon. Likewise, Emily, she's the business analyst, and she would be assisting the Richard and Sarah on the process design and configuration on the low-code platform. And then Ishan, who's a software developer, would be doing all the integration and change deployment within the platform. Ruby would be working on the portals and the forms and the themes. Bob will take care of all data architecture, any masters from a database perspective. And Swami, who is the senior architect, he will be executing all the deployment setup and anything related to the DevOps. So the team is set up, everyone knows their roles and responsibilities, and they kick off from here. So Swami starts in, he logs into the low-code platform of Newgen, and Swami sets up the entire application architecture, how the overall system has to work upon. He sets up the development environment, the test environment, and the production. So he used the deployment manager of the Newgen, configures various instances, which is as per the life cycle of a project migration, and define various roles and responsibilities, rights for different users on the different environments from development to test to production. So once all that is set by Swami, he assigns the rights, business teams are able to access the system, and they start doing the requirement definition. Here, the business team, rather than writing all the requirements in piece of paper or using just the graphical tools, they are directly working on the low-code platforms, process discovery, process definition interfaces, where they are defining all the requirements and the benchmarks, what they want to achieve from this process automation. They detail them into various actions and activities which would be involved in this process automation journey for onboarding a new customer into the bank. And they define various tasks and the scope of the solution which they need to benchmark upon. So once they set, they also get into the detailed requirement in terms of what all information they need to capture for different stakeholders. So there could be an online customer, there could be a back office relationship manager for the branch. So what would those individuals' roles do? They can easily define all that on the platform itself. And Amanda comes in, who's the compliance officer. She chips in and she provides her inputs around the various compliance related activities which the business team need to make sure while they are defining this particular process. So once the team is set, they know what all data they need to capture. Bob, who's the DPA, could easily capture that into the platform and convert it into configurable master data into the system, where he configure what all data they need to capture, how that data would be stored into the data models within the system. So he used the master definition module of the low-code automation platform to configure all the variables and the rights associated with them. Now, once Bob has set up, he defines those rights into the system and assigns it to the business users. Unfortunately, the pandemic happens and the team is stuck at their homes, but they need not have to worry. The NewGen system, which we have offered to them, the Smart Bank, is 100% cloud ready. It was already running on AWS, so the team could easily work remotely and continue their automation or the digital transformation journey seamlessly. So the next meeting is called virtually. The team collaborates back. They review what all they did, discuss the progress, what they did in the previous sprint, and discuss if there are any doubts on anything. Where the team works upon and agrees some integrations which they need to do. So they assign a certain integration to Ishan in terms of the fraud check, KYC check, any duplicity check, which they need to do with the other systems as part of this process automation journey. So the team continues the requirement which they have specified in the requirement definition or discovery stage. Now they translate into graphical processes within the low-code automation. So Richard, Sarah, and Emily, the business analysts, they could quickly configure, drag and drop all the process end to end from the initiation till the end processing over the graphical process modeling tool. They could also define various rules and logics basis which how a customer journey within the bank could be defined inside the back office process. So they set all the rules which are required. They set all the permissions, rights, communication like an email. So if a customer is onboarded, what would be a welcome message and letters would be sent to that particular client or the customer into the system. They define various data rights. So all the data models which Bob has configured and assigned it to the team could easily configure all the rights for the different stages or the stakeholders of the process. They could configure integration. So Ishan used the inbuilt integration adapters into the low-code platform, through which Ishan could easily register all the REST or SOAP APIs into the configurable integration adapters to exchange data information from this system to any other external system. And do all the mapping and all graphically. So the next sprint meeting happens. The whole team collaborates back. They review the progress, what they did. They define the process. They have a run through of what all they did and clarify any doubts. Now here Ishan raises a concern that one of the system does not have a ready API in short term, and he is facing this as a challenge on how to do that particular integration. So Swami, who's the architect, he suggests, Ishan, why don't you try the non-intrusive integration capabilities within the NewGen platform? So Ishan quickly picks up. He used the robotics, the RPA adapters the NewGen low-code platform offers. He could easily drag and drop and model out a non-intrusive integration to the system where he need to perform that particular duplicity check. He could model that out over here without any coding. In parallel, the business team, along with our analyst Emily, they are working on defining the end customer, the portal journey, for the applicants. So they define how would the information would be gathered on the portal from the end customer. So the customer would come and provide their names, details, what product in the Smart Bank they are looking for. So the entire journey is configured through the intuitive form designer available in the low-code platform. So once they are set, Ruby configures all those forms and all, and because she is also responsible for the UX and the themes within the Smart Bank, so she could use the low-code theme manager over here and define all the themes policies related to the experience as per the Smart Bank. So once she's set, she reviews all the themes are applied, she is happy, and she moves on. Parallelly, Sarah and Emily, they are working on the turnaround time and SLA definition. Now, this is very important as part of the process because Smart Bank wants to convey to the market that they can open an account in less than a day. Now, to do that, they have to define various triggers and SLAs, escalations in the back office process so that they don't miss out that turnaround time while onboarding new customers into Smart Bank. Then the next sprint meetings comes in by Sandra. The team collaborates back. They again go through what changes or advancements they did in the process automation journey and identifies the next gaps. Amanda, who is our compliance officer, she highlights various compliances and the checklist business rules we need to follow as part of the journey. So Amanda starts working with the business team now and start adding various compliances and the rules which the team needs to make sure in as part of the onboarding cycle for the customer. So she defined various policies. How do they qualify a customer? Which kind of a customer can be open, can be given an account in Smart Bank? So they easily configure all their business logics and rules from a compliance and security perspective into the rules definition module, which is the BRMS, what we call over here in the platform. So there, the team could easily configure all the business rules for qualification of the customer into Smart Bank. Once they are set, the business team, along with Ishan, they set up the user dashboards and journeys for the entire bank's team, how they will be reviewing all the applications and the cases which they receive as part of the journey. So they work upon the user dashboards, how each user will work, what would be their roles in the back office system, how they would be allocated different tasks and activities in the system. So once they are set, the business teams continue for defining various reports, as in the performance reports and the dashboard reports on how many cases we have received. So that they could do easily in the report designer module of the low-code platform. They could define various operational turnaround time reports of how many customers they got today, how many leads, how many processed, how many rejected, how many are hold. That they could easily configure into the report designing platform into the low-code system of Fusion. So there's the next meeting called in as per the sprint plan. The team goes through all the activities they have done in the past week, and they decide on the decision to release the system now as a go, no-go for the UAT and end-to-end testing. So they decided to go forward. Swami enables into the DevOps environment of migration automatically from the dev to the test environment through the DevOps manager, the deployment manager module of the low-code automation. So now as the whole system is in test, the entire business team goes through an end-to-end functional testing of along all the stakeholders, how the system would work from the digital customer journeys to the back office to the reporting over the low-code platform. And they also wanted to go deeper and analyze what if there are thousands of applications made in a day, how would the system behave, how would their operations benchmarks would behave on this low-code platform. Now for that, they use the process insights feature of the low-code platform where they could actually simulate various transactions that could come in due course to come once the process is launched into the market. So they could analyze, they could simulate if there are 1,000 applications, there are X types of customer and how it would be allocated to different users. Are there any bottlenecks in the process to handle those volumes? How many people would they need in the back office system to process those applications when they achieve those volumes which they want to achieve using the system. So simulation helps them analyze multiple versions of the process and compare which is giving them more performance. Once they are set, they have simulated, the insights are ready. Amanda, being the compliance officer, has to make sure all the standard operating procedures, the rules, policies, the process documentation is archived into the Smart Bank's central repository. So they use the document generation feature within the low-code platform, which automatically generates all the documentation regarding the process, the policy, the rights, the entire standard operating procedure in a matter of a click, which gets automatically archived and versioned out into the platform. So the team collaborates back in as their final sprint, and they decide on the next go or no go. So which they were all happy to launch this process into the bank. So this was a high-level customer onboarding automation journey, and how a bank like this could use the internal capacity to automate an end-to-end journey on the NewGen low-code platform today. So thank you, and I will hand it over to my colleague Anurag.
Thank you, Varun. We had a great insight on low-code challenges and opportunities from Rob, and then Varun took us through the low-code automation journey for the customer onboarding in a bank. What I'm going to do is to speak about a couple of successes, a couple of case studies, one in an insurance company and the other in a bank, on how NewGen's low-code platform kind of enabled their processes in a little bit different kind of use cases. So the first use case is for a variable annuity closed block in a service request management space for an insurance company. So here the scope included, like Rob mentioned, a lot of paper, email, fax, based manual work. The service requests originated from the policyholders, from the agents, and those come in through various shape and form. Somebody could send in a letter through the mail. Somebody could attach documents, PDFs, write certain things in the email body, could fax certain pages. There could be multiple attachments in an email. So there were various types of incoming requests, and the volumes were staggering, like about on a monthly basis, the volumes could range from 250,000 to upwards of 300,000 requests from all these channels to be processed. And these requests again were from various categories. And the request types, if you see, those are more than hundreds of request types, varying from the financial, non-financial, claims, and service request contracting types. So a policy holder could send in a request pertaining to one policy, pertaining to multiple policies, pertaining to multiple types of requests. And the challenges that the organization was facing, in addition to the high volume, was also to maintain the service level. Varun talked about how service level agreements and the turnaround times were supported while he took us through the journey. That was one of the key challenges that this organization was facing. And also how they were engaging the customer, both from the end customer policyholders as well as the agents of the customers who kind of work on behalf of the customers to engage with the insurance company. So the customer engagement through the multiple channels were another challenge that the organization was trying to solve. And as a future outlook, the company also was in an expansion mode in the sense that they were looking to acquire multiple such closed block annuity, variable annuity closed blocks, and add to their portfolio and continue to service the policyholders. So given that kind of a challenge and the scope, The solution that got implemented was on Newgen's low-code platform, and it included implementation of an enterprise service request management, which spanned across the contact center and the back office. So depending on the service request category and the type, it could either be serviced through certain users and groups and teams within the contact center, or it could go to the back office and it could traverse through multiple teams in order to get those processed. And the number of users were about 400 between these two groups, the contact centers and the back office. So as a part of the solution, a complex content management was implemented. So if you see, we talked about these service requests coming in through paper, through email, fax, and we also enabled as a part of this implementation a portal-based service request ingestion by the customer and the agent. Now, what could happen is, if I'm a policyholder, I could send in a request. Let's say I'm sending an email. I may be holding more than one policy, and I may have 3 different types of service requests, one pertaining to financial nature and a couple of others non-financial nature. And I could send in all of those either as one attachment to the email or as multiple documents, or I could similarly, if I'm sending a letter, if I'm mailing it, I could write 2 or 3 different pages of these letters and attach all the supporting documents which are required. So you see, these are different and complex types of content which are coming in from various channels. So as a part of this implementation, the content management piece of the low-code platform enabled the intelligent identification of these incoming content, splitting of these contents into the respective request types, and then taking it through the workflow process using the business rules management system to identify which request requires which group to be allocated to, whether certain request requires parallel processing, more than one user or more than one team to be acted upon, and if certain things can be done through contact center or in parallel, it could also be required to be processed by a back office users. So all of those were included into the process that got implemented, and as a processing steps, it also integrated with the underlying policy admin systems, and there were multiple core systems which interacted with the service request management implementation to push and pull data bidirectionally to enable the users to be able to see all the required data, all the required information, take decision, make the transactions, and get the operation done with. So that was a kind of a holistic solution which got implemented. And if you see the benefits that the organization got, it obviously started from multiple channels, omni-channel support for the intake of the requests. So if you look at the customer engagement part, right? So customers and the agents continued to engage with the company in the way which is most convenient to them. If somebody is comfortable writing a letter, the organization enabled and continued accepting those letters, but managed those letters and physical mails intelligently with the content management system of the low-code platform, still to be able to process with the same turn time, with the same service level, with the same customer experience, and be able to revert back to the customer with those processing statuses. So the customer engagement continued to be enhanced with this solution. One of the key challenges that they were facing was also how these 400 users, the employees of the organization, how they were dealing with managing all of these requests. So there was an enhanced experience for the employees because it kind of unified their experience. It kind of combined all the information and data into one interface. it also allowed the organization to meet the regulatory compliance where all these artifacts received from the policyholders and agents were required to be maintained in an immutable storage. So let me quickly take you through a second case study, which is for a leading bank in a Asia Pacific region. The previous one was an insurance company within the United States. This one is for a leading bank in Asia Pacific. The use case was more or less the same with slight difference in the sense that here, this being a bank, it dealt into multiple lines of businesses, and it included deposits, loans, credit cards, investments, wealth management, and the group of users were same like contact center and the back office like in earlier case studies. But here, the types of service requests were more than 600, which were required to be processed through the platform. And each of these line of business, deposit, loan, credit card, and so on and so forth, came with their own respective product processor systems. So there were multiple applications in which the requests were being served through. So if I'm a customer sending in a request, and if I hold multiple relationships, the user receiving that request, be it in a contact center or in the back office, were required to flip through multiple applications, thus keeping the customer on the call on hold and creating that frustration in the customer engagement. As a part of the solution, not only we unified the interface for all of these multiple lines of businesses, but it also eliminated the manual allocation of work. It also enhanced the request tracking through this 360-degree dashboard, and the turn time and tracking, in the sense that the average call handling time of the contact center users were significantly decreased as part of this implementation. So looking at the time, let me quickly jump through my last slide, where I kind of wanted to give a visibility on what are the possible areas of this service request management application area. So we talked about an insurance case study, a banking case study, where the end customer service requests were managed. Similarly, if you have got partners, for example, if you are running a shared service center, and if you have got partners like suppliers or vendors, if you want to manage their processes, or if you want to manage your internal employees' processes, employee onboarding, IT service desk, and those kind of things, all of such varied service request management use cases can be implemented on the NewGen low-code platform, which we have implemented in several organizations. So let me take a pause here. That was the kind of couple of case studies that I wanted to quickly take you through.
Thanks very much, Anurag. I think we have a couple of questions that come through the Q&A function, and do keep them coming in as well. We still have about 10 minutes to go, so definitely would like to put those through to our speakers today, and they'll get them to be answered. So the first question that I see is a question for Rob. How does low-code support agile development?
Well, certainly, if you think about the concept of agile development, and how we put it into application, everything about low code in terms of the development environment is certainly going to support that. So, obviously there's a correlation of how software should be developed, and that it should be cyclical and with multiple feedback levels, et cetera. But the other part of the question is, do the folks that actually choose low-code platforms say that they embrace agile development? And they do to a very great degree. So, folks who are developing these types of applications, about 77% likely to be using agile or planning to increase agile. So, yeah, a very strong correlation there.
Good. The next question, I think this is probably directed to NewGen. Does your platform support mobile access by business users?
Yes. So NewGen provides two types of mobile access. One is through the apps, which are supported on iOS as well as Android, and the other is through the mobile browsers itself. So the interfaces, user interfaces and customer interfaces of NewGen low-code platform are responsive, which means you can access those through the browser on a laptop, on a tablet, on a mobile. But at the same time, if you want to have an enriched experience by having a lot of flexibilities and features available, NewGen also provides the apps, native apps for the iOS and Android, which can be used for the work item processing, the document viewing, the rules, the checklisting, approvals, and all of those things. So within mobile, we have our NEMF, we call it NewGen Enterprise Mobility Framework, through which custom apps can be built, or if an organization has already an app and wants to include NewGen piece of app within the existing app, it can integrate with the organizational app to provide the comprehensive app mobility feature.
Thank you. I guess this, kind of lead to the next question. I think it's kind of related as well. The question is, how is the integration with other systems being supported?
So the integration within the platform is easily supported. There are drag and drop based adapters through which you can easily configure various APIs which are exposed by different systems, and they could be easily ingested into the platform to exchange information or a content from NewGen to any other system, both ways. And but this is all for the conditions where you have an API. In the case where you don't have an API, then system also support a robotic or a bot-driven non-intrusive integration where we can go to another system, like fill a form automatically like a human, generate some outcome and capture that and take it back to the process. So it's done both in an intrusive and a non-intrusive way, depending whether you have an API or if you don't, then you can use the bots for that. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is low code for complex high severity processes or for low risk simple internal?
Well, so this is Rob. I can certainly give my thoughts on that. Actually,
go ahead.
We've been at this research on this topic now for a number of years, and because I think there's often this sense that, well, low code is for certain applications that are either of less complexity or less mission criticality, and it's just not the case. So there's two patterns that we observe with low code. One is that the survey responses will say that it is often and increasingly being put into mission critical application situations. So that part I think is very clear. There's also probably another pattern worth mentioning here, which is that not only is low code more, very highly aligned with mission critical applications, it's far more highly aligned with driving strategic initiatives. So if we look at things like applications that are driving particular revenue, applications that are representing brand in the marketplace, these things that tend to drive the innovation of the organization, these are far, far more likely to be deployed in low code.
That's great. I guess the next question is, how much time does it take to design a process?
So I'll throw out my thoughts. I think the NewGen folks might have thoughts on this as well.
Sure.
So it depends, right? So I mean, there are extraordinarily complex processes. The requirements gathering can go on for for weeks or even longer to gather all the requirements for those processes. The processes that we're biting off increasingly now are more microprocesses, sub-processes that are supporting the larger processes. And we're finding some really strong patterns that say we can bring the right constituents to bear. We bring process expertise, perhaps the Six Sigma, the business expertise, the automation folks are iterating on these things really quickly in terms of defining the requirements. Those processes can be defined very quickly, but more importantly, they're defined in a manner in which we expect them to change, and we deploy them on software in which it's easy to implement those changes.
Thank you, Rob. And Varun and Anurag. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Rob said. So yes, I mean, Rob talked about microservices and the requirement definition and the deployment time. So yes, once the requirements and those things are clear, because the requirement elicitation and the brainstorming within an organization could take any length of time. But after we have zeroed on our requirements, creating those processes, configuring those processes is like matter of days time. Some of the simple processes can also be configured within hours, but if we just classify those processes in terms of complexity, a simple complex process, simplex process could be configured from start to finish and go live within 2 to 3 weeks is what we are looking at. And if we look at a medium complexity process, it could probably be done in 4 to 6 weeks. That's the kind of promise that low-code platform gives you. And like Rob touched upon, iterative improvement. So the reason why low-code is popular and attractive is because you are able to configure a process in 2 to 4 weeks, and then if you need to make change, if you need to make improvement, you could invest a few hours or maybe a couple of days and go to the next version and so on and so forth. So that's the kind of speed and the agility that we promise from the low-code environment of NewGen platform.
Fantastic. We have one more question, which is how is this platform adaptive to typical industry-specific business and use case? And do we have any instant templates that we can go to live quickly?
Okay. I'll take that.
So okay. Go ahead, Varun.
Thanks, Anurag. So the platform could be adopted into almost every industry. So we have references and cases where, like I mentioned, in government, there are so many processes from a citizen-centric services a public body offers to their end citizens. So it could be from an application of a license or a grant which a citizen might make to the government. So there are thousands of processes which could be automated over here from a government body perspective. Likewise, in a bank, there are multiple processes of customer onboarding, lending, and various financial products which a bank offers or service to their end clients. They can even scale it to their enterprise service desk. So if a citizen or a customer wants a change of an address, want to change a service or a product, what they already have with that institution, they can scale all of those processes into this low-code platform. And as NewGen, what we have also done is we have invested into building what we call an accelerators, which are out-of-the-box processes, and there are hundreds of them for various industries and verticals, which can be used as an accelerated process within their automation journey. So you can take a ready-made accelerator process, let's say for customer onboarding or for a grant issuance in a government, and then make or adopt changes as per your organization unique needs quickly on top of that. So that could be, say, 15 or 20% uniqueness as per each organization to organization. So that the whole program accelerates your implementation timelines. Anurag, you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch upon a couple of things. So Varun, you talked about solution accelerators. So Newgen low-code platform has got what Forrester generally terms it as smart apps, or the solution accelerator in Newgen nomenclature, in multiple verticals: banking, insurance, shared services, government, horizontal cross-industry like HR, admin, and those kind of departments, compliances, regulations. So there are multiple such use cases in these verticals for which those smart apps or solution accelerators are existing out of the box. What it does is it enables the implementer to quickly get on the deployment stage. Once the requirements are received, you can quickly take one of such a smart app, and instead of investing 2 to 3 weeks, probably in the first week itself, you could be very close to deployment stage and go live stage. So that's what it provides from the solution accelerator and smart apps.
Well, thank you so much for the Q&A time. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of the session. For those of you with questions that we haven't addressed, we will endeavor to get back to you, to get in touch with you actually within the next few days. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for attending today's session. We'll be sending you a follow-up email with contact information and a link to the recording after this. Again, thank you for participating, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you, Rob, Anurag, and Varun.
Thank you.